Whenever I put out a YouTube video, especially if it's on a controversial topic, I will often get people criticizing me in the comments. There's nothing wrong with this, but currently what I do is give them one reply, and if they want to go deeper than that, I tell them it's got to happen over voice. I'm happy to speak to anybody or address any criticisms, but I don't text debate. Today I'll be addressing why this is the case. I'm going to be using a recent example of an interaction between myself and another vegan called Mike. As you'll see over the course of this video, text debates often result in poor outcomes for massive amounts of fatigue. You usually can't dedicate time to them because there's no guarantee your interlocutor will respond promptly. This makes conversations stretch out for days on end. Furthermore, even simple questions garner long-winded responses that dodge the question at hand. In a voice call, I can dedicate an hour or two to knock out the whole conversation and quickly steer us back on track if my opponent starts to drift. A bit of context before we get into this. Mike is part of a camp of vegans who support the Leslie Cross definition of veganism. That is, the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals. Now I could make a whole video about this definition, but for now I'll just say that my key issue with it is that it's not clear to me what exploitation means. Without knowing that, I can't say whether I support it or not. So this whole ordeal actually began when I sent a message to somebody else called David C. Arenas. He had left a comment on my video on the definition of veganism in support of the Leslie Cross definition, which is why I messaged him. So he was actually the one to initiate discourse between the two of us. Now, I won't go over that whole exchange because it was over DMs and it can be ethically questionable to show DMs publicly, but I sent him a summary of our conversation at the end and I'll show you that. So, I'll close this conversation by summarizing. I initially messaged you to confirm your position on the definition of veganism. You were unable to give a clear answer. Eventually, I got an answer from you and asked if you would be open to a call on the topic. Multiple times you brought up reasons for not wanting to call, but I addressed them and repeated my question. You were also distracted from the conversation by bringing up other topics. Along the way, you bizarrely brought up utilitarianism and insisted that I'm a utilitarian, then made claims about me only wanting to call you to gain clout. In the end, you said you simply don't like the medium of a voice call and prefer text. I gave my reasons for preferring voice, which included pointing to some examples of your behavior in this very chat that exemplify why I don't like text. Later on, I saw that David had made this post in which he mentions being blocked by people he dubs welfarists. In this case, that basically refers to everyone who doesn't agree with him. He says, veganism has been misrepresented for so long that activists who defend the actual vegan stance are being blocked and censored by welfarists and woke orgs, and semi-influencers who only want to save face instead of acknowledging their misinformed views and finally start sending the right message. Are you in this for the animals or only to get credit for exactly what you haven't done and on top of that, profit from it? Now note that David seems to spend a lot of time commenting on other vegans' posts, criticizing them and saying they don't understand veganism. I then left this comment. Maybe the reason people block you is because you constantly attack others, yet refuse to have a productive discussion or defend your own position via a voice call. Any conversation via text just leads to you bringing up irrelevant topics and not answering simple questions. Just a speculation. My offer for a call still stands, by the way. Until you accept it, maybe keep your half-baked critiques to yourself. Maybe that's a little harsh, but consider that David says really nasty things to other vegans that are just trying to help. And I don't have any respect for someone who will do that while being incapable of defending their own position. Now this is where Mike enters the picture. He actually asked to have a voice chat, so I said yes, and I DM'd him. The exchange was very weird, and I summarize it in my next comment. Well, I DM'd you. You didn't seem to know what topic you wanted to discuss, and then when I suggested one, you ghosted me. Nice. Later on, I left this comment on one of Mike's posts. Hey Mike, why did you ask me if I want a voice chat and then ghost me? He said, I realized that I could never conquer you in a debate. It was a lost cause for my ego. I surrender. So I said, okay, well, we don't have to have a debate. In fact, the word I used to describe our talk was discussion. You say you surrender, but that doesn't seem to be indicating a change in any position you hold. Just know that if you change your mind, my DMs are open. I was going to leave it there, but surprisingly, he actually left what seemed like a really nice comment, and so I decided I would engage via text this time. Now, as he's a supporter of the Leslie Cross definition, I simply asked him to define exploitation. He defined this as the use of animals by humanity. Now, this is a bit unclear to me because while I do have a conception of use, it doesn't seem the case that all use is non-vegan. For example, on my view, if you take a photograph of an ant, you've used them as a model, but I don't see anything ethically wrong with this, so I just asked him to define use to see if his idea of use is different to mine. Now, very bizarrely, he just dodged my question and said, are you seeking symbiosis? This was still at the beginning and we were acting quite cordial to one another, so I got clarity on what he meant, answered it, and redirected him back to my question, letting him know that I don't like to let conversations get off topic. I said, my goal is to understand the definition of veganism that you use. Not to be rude, but would you mind answering the question I asked previously? I just don't like to let conversations get off topic. Now this is already a small example of where things go wrong in text. I waited 10 minutes for a reply just to have to redirect him back to the question because he failed to answer it. Via voice, this could all have been sorted out immediately. Now 10 minutes isn't that bad, I know, but it adds up, and as you'll see, this just happens over and over again, creating more and more fatigue while not getting any closer to a resolution. It was a yes or no question, but instead of giving me a yes or no, he went on this strange ramble. I'm not trying to say there was any ill intent, I just mean that he was saying a lot of words that didn't answer the question at hand. He said, regardless of any claimed benefit to animals, humanity has no right to exploit animals. Is justice a difficult concept to understand? To be frank, the words used in the original definition were as basic as you can get. So please come to the point of your misunderstanding. I redirected him back to the question, pointing out that it was a simple yes or no question. He still didn't give a yes or no. I redirected him back again and said, could you please give me a clear yes or no? Then, after you've given that answer, if you'd like to elaborate further, that's fine by me. Then he just said, no. And that's great that he gave a clear answer, but it's not very helpful when it comes to explaining what he means by use. So I asked him to spell out what use means, and he just refused to answer. He said I should spell it out, but we're not talking about what I consider to be use, we're talking about what he considers to be use, and I already did my best at approximating that, and he just said no. So I directed him back to the question yet again, and yet again he didn't answer and just started asking me questions. Note that this has been going on for many hours due to the nature of text. If this was via voice, I wouldn't really mind having a kind of crappy conversation because it's only going to take an hour or so out of my day, but this is pretty draining. It goes on this way for a while. Then, yet again, I redirected him back to the question, and yet again he just responded with a question. It was so strange to me that he asked how he hasn't answered my question extensively when he was just saying, you define it. I did answer him though. I said, again, this is a question, not an answer. However, I will answer it. You have given 3 responses to the question at hand. One was refusing to answer. Your turn, you spell it out. The subsequent one was asking me 2 questions. And finally, you asked me another question, which I've now done you the courtesy of answering, despite it not being the topic at hand. So none of your responses are answers to my question, much less extensive answers. So, since my question has not been answered, I will ask it again. I'm happy to go into other topics once this is resolved, but for now, please just answer. Could you please spell out exactly what constitutes use of animals by humanity? And now he just starts insulting me. Do you know how to read? So after directing him back to the question, he dodges again. Now all you're doing is being aggressive and insulting me. This is just poor form, I have to say. It also appears to be in contradiction with your previous claim that we can engage in civil correspondence and that the point of your page is to educate. If there's something I've missed, then please point it out to me. In any case, I'd still like my question answered. Could you please spell out exactly what constitutes use of animals by humanity? That's okay, dock me for poor form. Don't you find it interesting that the whole vegan movement is against animal exploitation and you are still trying to find out what that means? Do you do outreach? If so, how do you navigate that confusion? So I say I'm very happy to discuss these topics and answer any questions you have after we resolve the topic at hand. If it's odd to you that I don't know what you mean, then it should be very easy for you to explain. However, since you've consistently not been able to explain, I'm beginning to suspect that maybe you don't have a clear idea of what the words you're using mean. So please alleviate these suspicions by answering my question. Could you please spell out exactly what constitutes use of animals by humanity? And I guess he thinks he's being smart here when he asks me to define using, though it's just him dodging the question again. So I say, yet again, this is not an answer to my question. It's quite clear that you're just engaging in bad faith questioning now. However, I will answer this question as it might serve as an example for how you could answer my question, which you've now dodged a total of 6 times. When I said using in my previous comment, I was referring to saying, typing, or communicating. This might also be a good time for me to point out that saying you don't know what it means is a perfectly valid response. I'm not trying to humiliate you or achieve ponage. If you did that, I would actually have great respect for you, as it would show humility. I'm definitely not saying that you have to give that answer though, just letting you know that it is an option. Now I have to say, my patience is running dry. I think it is terrible for veganism to have people just adamantly refuse to engage in reasonable discussion. Especially consider that you began this discussion. You asked me to voice call, and you said you look forward to any inquiries I have. If you do not answer my question, in your immediate reply, it will communicate to me that you are completely and utterly incapable of defending your position and therefore should not be taken seriously, and I will not be responding. Could you please spell out exactly what constitutes use of animals by humanity? I believe at this point we've literally been speaking for days, and it would have been so much easier to just have a voice call. So I decided it was not worth pursuing and just told him to answer or I'll stop responding. Now, his next comment wasn't an answer and didn't really make any sense to me. He left another comment after that in which he tells me to have good faith and tell him what I think veganism means instead of bossing him around. Now, I don't really see how I was bossing him around when all I did was ask him a question. He could be referring to the fact that I kept redirecting him back to that question, but the only reason I had to do that was because he kept dodging it. And it's so ironic that he tells me to have good faith. I never said anything I didn't mean, while he asked me questions he didn't care about the answer to, just to annoy me. Now, while I did say I wouldn't respond, I then thought of a better way to phrase my question. Recall that I'm trying to uncover the meaning of exploitation. The only clarity he's given me on this is to say that exploitation means use. But even drawing an animal requires use of it as a model. So I asked him, On your view, is it the case that for all actions, if an action uses an animal, then it is prohibited under veganism? If he says yes, then drawing an animal is non-vegan under his definition. This shows the bizarre conclusions of his view. If he says no, then the only way for his view to make sense would be if he's using a very particular definition of use. But he refuses to share what his definition is, so it seems much more likely that his view just doesn't make sense. And he said yes, in addition to asking questions not relevant to the topic. So I redirected him back to the topic and asked him my follow-up question. Do you consider drawing an animal to be using them? He dodged. I redirected. He dodged again. I redirected again. And then he left this comment. I don't have time for your intellectual dishonesty. You are on some ego trip where you think you can boss others around. You never answer a damn question yourself, and this is a one-sided exchange. Take your energy vampirism somewhere else. So, apparently I'm a vampire. I said it's interesting how you started this conversation and said you were happy to answer any concerns I have, yet when I expose weak points in your view, you start hurling insults, dodging questions, and trying to change the topic. I've said I'm happy to answer any questions you like, however, I'm not going to do that mid-conversation as I don't like to get off topic. If you're that curious about my view, the fastest way for you to have a turn asking questions would just be to answer mine instead of dodging. Then we can put this topic to a rest. So, is your answer a yes or no? He said, here's the thing, it never ends, does it? I've been answering your lame questions time and time again. I have other stuff to do than to define everything over and over for you. Are you a vegan activist or not? No, you aren't. You are a debate bro with no purpose except to bewilder with your inability to understand anything. Good luck on your quest, and I can see why people aren't interested in responding to you anymore. I said it actually would end if you just answered instead of repeatedly dodging. That's why this conversation takes so long. Yes or no? And at this point, he actually just deleted the comment thread. I honestly think the reason is because he could see the ridiculous conclusions of his view. That is, that drawing or taking a photograph of an animal is not vegan. It's pretty embarrassing to hold such a ridiculous view so strongly. Consider that he wanted to have this conversation so others could learn from it. Given how painful this conversation was, the only conceivable benefit of this interaction would be to keep it around for posterity so that others could learn from it, and he tried to take away even that possibility. I said, wow, deleting my comment after I exposed the conclusions of your view? Low move. Veganism should be about destroying dogmatism, not defending it. Back at the original thread, I pointed out this happened in response to Talis, who, by the way, has a great Substack that you should follow. I'll link it below. Then Mike left this response, which I addressed. Yeah, I deleted it because you are unwilling to answer a single question of your own. I answered your questions over and over about basic words. I don't want my audience to waste a single minute on your non-points and disingenuous "what does that mean"ism. In my whole time, I have never met a vegan activist refuse to answer the question, what is veganism, as much as you. But knowing your other content, I knew that you are after changing the definition of veganism. That is the whole reason you never answer a single question yourself. Your tactic is to play the victim and act as if nobody ever answers you, mundane question after mundane question. What does use mean? I don't get it. Stop dodging me. What does simple mean? I will only answer the little vegan artist. Define this. I don't get it. Define that. Stop dodging. You are a sentientist, from what I gather, and you have no point to offer in writing, ever. Did you know that others don't exist to serve you? You are a control freak with an ego and no intention to help get the animals emancipated. Otherwise, you would have something meaningful to say for yourself. You also don't respect others in the conversation. You just expect everyone to serve the data and offer none to work with. So I said, Lots of false claims here, but I won't go through them one by one. If what you say is true, it would make no sense for you to delete the comment thread because it would serve as proof of your claims. Perhaps the real reason you deleted it was to remove any evidence against this false sequence of events you've presented. Thankfully, I screenshotted the whole thing. And just in case you're curious what the false claims were, they were that I was unwilling to answer a single question. I did actually answer questions. Although I will note that even if I didn't, this wouldn't be a bad thing, as we have to stay on track and his questions just distracted from the topic. He said I'm disingenuous. He said I refused to answer the question, what is veganism? I actually just said we can get to it after finishing our current discussion. He said I never answer a single question myself. That's not true. He said my tactic is to play the victim. He said I act as if nobody ever answers me. He also put false quotes around things I never said, as evidenced by the screenshots I've shown you in this video. He said I have no point to offer in writing ever. He said I'm a control freak. And he said that I have no intention to get the animals emancipated. So this is just one example of what happens when you try to have a text discussion with someone this bad faith. Now consider that I get a lot of people commenting, and it was pretty exhausting just dealing with this one guy. Of course I'm not going to be spending my whole life debating people in the comment section. Once again, if you have some criticism for me, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to improve my views. Let's just have a voice call and knock it out in an hour. Hopefully this video serves as an explanation for why I don't text debate, as well as showing the pathetic intellectual caliber of this pro-Leslie Cross definition camp of vegans. Anyway, Mike or David, if you see this video, feel free to cope in the comment section. I'm happy for a voice call anytime. And if you'd like to reach me, just hit me up on Discord at MehtaEthics.